Let's jump right into this explainer. It is Memorial Day weekend 2026, and honestly, the geopolitical landscape is balancing on a razor's edge right now. We're looking at a rapidly escalating crisis between the United States and Iran, and the margin for error has essentially shrunk to zero. We're talking about peace or a massive regional conflict literally hanging in the balance here. And the decisions being made over these next few days, they're going to echo around the globe for years to come.
To really grasp the stakes here, we have to ground ourselves in some pretty severe rhetoric that emerged this week. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, issued a deeply unsettling warning about potential U.S. or Israeli strikes. They promised, and I quote, "crushing blows in places you cannot even imagine." Now, when you understand how the IRGC operates, you realize this isn't just your standard political posturing. No, they've spent decades building this vast, sophisticated network of proxy forces across the Middle East. We're talking Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and various militias in Iraq and Syria. So a crushing blow in an unimaginable place, that's a direct threat of asymmetric warfare. It means any military escalation won't just stay neatly confined to Iranian borders. It could spark a synchronized, multi-front conflict designed to completely overwhelm U.S. assets and allies.
Because this whole situation splits into two very distinct tracks, we're going to break down the timeline step by step. We'll start with on the brink, move to the final ultimatum, examine the threat of retaliation, look at the flashpoint at the Strait of Hormuz, and then wrap up with the ticking clock.
Okay, Section 1, on the brink. Let's see how this current holiday weekend is really setting the stage for what comes next.
You know, the breathing room bought by that early April ceasefire has basically evaporated into a critical weekend of military preparations. Think back to early April for a second. That temporary ceasefire was like a much-needed pressure release valve. Both sides were exhausted, and it stopped the immediate strikes to give everyone some time to maneuver. But as we know, diplomatic oxygen burns fast. By Wednesday of this week, a new, highly anticipated U.S. proposal was transmitted, and then by Friday, the reality of the situation really set in. The U.S. military actively began prepping for fresh strikes. So that diplomatic window from April is slamming shut, and the gears of a massive military machine are loudly spinning up all over again.
And the urgency on the ground is staggering when you look at the actual logistics playing out. President Trump actually altered his New Jersey golf plans, noting that circumstances pertaining to government are keeping him from attending his own son Donald Trump Jr.'s wedding this weekend. At the exact same time, countless military and intelligence personnel are canceling their holiday time off. I mean, think about that. It is incredibly rare and a logistical nightmare to recall the apparatus of the U.S. intelligence and military community on a major American holiday. When the commander-in-chief skips a huge family milestone and key personnel are called back to their desks, it's a flashing red light showing just how absolute and immediate the threat of military action has become.
Moving right along to Section 2, the final ultimatum. Let's look at the first option currently sitting on the table, which is the diplomatic track.
Before any deal can even be considered, the U.S. has laid down some strict, unyielding boundaries. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly made the non-negotiable terms crystal clear. Iran can never possess a nuclear weapon, and, crucially, Iran cannot keep their enriched uranium. We really need to pause and understand the weight of that second point for Tehran. Iran has poured billions of dollars and immense national pride into their nuclear infrastructure. To them, this enriched uranium isn't just some bargaining chip you toss on the table. It's a core domestic achievement and their main geopolitical deterrent. Asking them to surrender it entirely? That is a massive, bitter pill to swallow. But for the U.S. administration, this isn't just a starting point for negotiations, it's an absolute hardline deal-breaker required to stop the war from reigniting.
So we've got this intense balancing act happening right now. It pits a diplomatic offer directly against the immediate threat of resumed strikes. On the diplomatic track, the U.S. is waiting for an Iranian response via Pakistani intermediary to end this nearly 3-month war. Pakistan is such a fascinating and vital player here. They share a super porous border with Iran and have this long history of facilitating back-channel talks when direct Washington-Tehran lines are frozen. But the alternative track? That's what makes this moment so intense. The military track is entirely binary. The proposal sent on Wednesday was explicitly a final offer. Rejecting it means U.S. military strikes resume immediately. It's quite literally a choice between sudden peace or immediate bombardment, sitting right there on a desk in Tehran.
Now, amidst all those heavy threats, we're actually witnessing some incredible psychological whiplash. The president expressed cautious optimism on Friday. He stated he was pretty impressed by Iran's negotiators and is prepared to give Tehran a couple of days to respond. He noted that, quote, "Iran is dying to make a deal. We'll see what happens." This is textbook carrot and stick strategy in real time.
On one hand, you have bombers literally warming up on the tarmac and troops being recalled. On the other hand, the president is publicly projecting diplomatic optimism, offering a potential graceful exit. It puts immense psychological pressure on the Iranian leadership, demanding they give substantial assurances while leaving the door just barely propped open.
Which brings us to Section 3, the threat of retaliation. Because while diplomacy is happening in the background, a massive military escalation is unfolding in real time.
Defense and intelligence officials definitely aren't just sitting by the phone waiting for a response. They're actively adjusting the U.S. military posture. They are updating overseas recall rosters, rotating tranches of troops out of the Middle East, and deliberately reducing the overall American military footprint. It's that third step that's honestly the most revealing. Reducing a military footprint during a crisis might sound like a retreat to some, but strategically, it is a highly offensive preparation. By moving troops out, the U.S. is actively removing soft targets from the region. They're literally clearing the board. If U.S. strikes happen and Iran retaliates through those proxies we mentioned, the Pentagon wants to make sure there are as few vulnerable American bases as possible caught in the crosshairs.
All right, Section 4, Flashpoint, Strait of Hormuz. We really have to look beyond the immediate military theater to understand the broader economic fallout that's been rattling energy markets.
Because the stakes here extend far beyond Washington and Tehran. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently traveled to Sweden to discuss a crucial contingency strategy with NATO members. They're calling it Plan B, and he's now heading to India. The goal? To reopen the Strait of Hormuz using military force if Iran refuses to do it themselves. Just to put this into perspective, roughly 20 to 30% of the world's total petroleum liquids consumption passes right through that strait. That's massive. It's the single most important oil choke point on the planet. If diplomacy fails and that strait stays compromised, it's not just a regional security issue anymore. It triggers the full-blown global economic crisis. And that is exactly why international alliances, from NATO all the way to India, are deeply involved in prepping to use force to make sure those vital energy markets keep flowing.
Let's head to Section 5, the ticking clock. This brings us right to the final piece of the puzzle, and really, the ultimate deciding factor.
If you're wondering about any constraints the president might face at home before authorizing a strike, well, those have essentially vanished. Over in Washington, House Republicans have abandoned their effort to hold a vote that would formally limit the president's authority to conduct military operations against Iran. The strategic implication of this is just huge. The domestic political brakes are completely off. Without friction from Congress, the executive branch effectively holds a blank check from a war powers perspective. It leaves a totally clear, unhindered path for the commander-in-chief to authorize military action the very second those talks in Pakistan fall apart.
And so, we arrive at this profoundly fragile stalemate. A final, unyielding offer sits on a desk. U.S. personnel have been recalled from their holiday plans, soft targets have been cleared from the blast radius, and global alliances have literally drawn up plans to seize the world's most critical oil choke point by force. Congress has stepped aside, leaving zero legislative barrier to war. That temporary oxygen from the ceasefire, it's completely gone. The sheer weight of this moment now rests squarely on the leadership in Tehran. It's a binary choice, a bitter diplomatic compromise or a sudden explosive escalation. Which of these two paths will ultimately become reality?